Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Riverdale, Season 7, Episode 16. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's pick up the fact is how this whole situation started off. It started off with Julian being like, yo, I have a Stag film, and we're all going to get a projector and watch it together. And then it led to Veronica being like, oh yeah, you can borrow one of my projectors because Clay and Kevin have been using the projector, like one of the particular theater rooms to watch their quote unquote wrestling movies. And she's perfectly fine with that. I love her just being like, yeah, just make sure you clean up afterwards. It's like, dude, I feel like this is probably like, Riverdale's always been like, had a lot of sex and like been a horny show. I feel like this is probably the horniest season of the show. It feels like this season was like, oh, Riverdale season 1 through 6. Yeah, hold our beer. Let me show you what's what. Cause I mean, it makes sense too, cause this is the most, there's always been sexual liberation in this show, but especially in a time frame like this, a lot of characters have had their sexual liberation journey, and now we're kind of getting a little bit of that kind of in a soft reboot-ish type of way in some regards. But even like Betty, like figuring out her own sexuality, like not to the extent that it was previously, but now, obviously like Tony and Cheryl's definitely in the same boat. When we got introduced to Kevin was already pretty confirmed in his firm, like, and comfortable in his own sexuality. So it's interesting how that's all kind of played out in this final scene. But like I said, it just feels like this is the horniest season. Riverdale might be the horniest show I've watched. That's like not like a show with like a whole bunch of like nudity and sex things like you'd see on like a more, I guess, premium channel or something like that. But it's like, cause like next to this, I'd say Vampire Diaries is probably like the horniest thing I've seen on this network. I'm sure like other things like maybe Gossip Girl and 90210 might have had like sex and stuff like that. But this is like, the Vampire Diaries had it quite a bit, and this feels like this probably like outstretches that. But maybe I'm just not remembering a lot of Vampire Diaries. But anyway, tangents and all that aside. I wasn't expecting the development to be what it is. Obviously, Veronica wants to come along to see like the Stag video, and so she invites Betty as well, understandable, and they're all enjoying it. Everyone's hooping, hollering, getting excited. And the moment like Betty kind of caught someone on the screen caught her eye, I was like, we're not going to find out that's her mom. Like, are we going to find out her mom has like a sordid history like this? But it turns out, no, it's not her mom. It's her sister. I was like, interesting. So that's where we do. Interesting. And so, Betty was kind of shocked to find her sister in one of these films and wanted to kind of talk to her about it. So Polly comes to Riverdale to talk to her. Turns out Polly isn't just, the Stag film was a one thing that she was kind of tricked into doing, but it kind of eventually had a domino effect of her becoming a burlesque dancer. And she's actually pretty well famous to the point she's, polyamory is her name, which is, I love the double entendre of the name, but, Veronica knows exactly who she is and eventually wants to throw like invite Polly to put on like a one-time performance. And I thought that was so interesting. Obviously only inviting the girls. But what I thought was so interesting was that Betty, when the show happened, Betty was so like captivated in it and ended up seeing herself on the stage, which I'm like, is this what you want to do? Which is also interesting. It's not the same thing, but I think it's kind of funny. And if I remember correctly, Lily Reinhart was in the movie. God, what was it called? Was it just called The Hustle, or was it like Hustlers? It was a stripper movie with I want to say Constance Wu, Jennifer Lopez. I think even Cardi B was in a little bit of it, but I felt like there was someone else. I knew about Constance Wu and Jennifer Lopez. I swear there was like a fourth other than her and Lily Reinhart, but I don't remember. So it almost feels befitting. It almost feels like, oh, that's interesting. Plus, we've already seen she kind of did a little bit of a peep show situation, her and Archie. She even kind of referenced it to her sister, like, oh, I kind of put on a little burlesque show of my own. It's like, oh, you always did kind of crush on Archie, which is kind of sweet. But this whole situation, I think, for one, it seems like that might be the path Betty goes out. It feels very befitting just because, once again, especially this season being like kind of her sexual liberation, her figuring it out, wanting to experience more in so many capacities, because the story that the poems they're reading in the like kind of writing class, that it's her, Clay, Miss Grundy, and Archie, about like one of the people they're reading is someone who's very like, hey, we're reading poets and stuff who have wives and girlfriends who also are very like polyamorous in the regards of like, yeah, they well, not even just like polyamory, they're very like pansexual in the regards of like, oh, they also kind of hook up with men and stuff, which kind of took me by surprise. But I guess I don't know why. I guess because in my head, when I think of that, I kind of think of 70s and 80s, where it's like, yo, love is love. Like, why get so caught up in that, man? Like, love is love and it's beautiful. But like, I guess it's like, right. I mean, it probably isn't going to be as like wide open and like hippie-ish like that, in this 50s, but it's probably going to be there, but it's going to be like obviously a lot more underground. I mean, it's so interesting how the like threads tie together so much throughout the episode, because you also at the same time you have like Lizzo giving Tony and Cheryl a lesbian like kind of like a magazine kind of in a kind of a similar vein. So but we'll circle back to that. But obviously, Betty's been trying to figure out a lot of stuff about herself in that kind of similar, like, in the more sexual vein and all that stuff. So it is a situation of it's all happening at the right. I think it's making a lot of stuff finally click into place, And but what I also think is so beautiful about this too is that the whole situation has brought Betty and Polly together again, because they haven't seen each other in years, and now Betty's understanding, oh, this is why mom's kind of so like crazy towards me. It's because it's like, right, she's overreacting because this is the life that Polly chose. Granted, we don't know how Hal feels about it. I can understand how Hal, Alice being who Alice is, it makes perfect sense for her to kind of flip out the way she is. Hal was not a part of this episode, so we have no idea his reaction to this. He might be playing like dumb to the world of like, yeah, I have no idea what that's about. I'm sure it seems like they both know, but they mainly focus on Alice's reaction, so we have no idea. Maybe Hal just pretends like it's whatever. Like, you could definitely see a father having more issues with that. I mean, a mother is entitled to have her issues too, but you could definitely, it feels like a mother could have a lot of issues with it, but it feels like you could definitely see a father having even more issues. But I could actually see, even if Hal has a lot of issues with it, I could see Alice having even more issues, because she's so very like, oh, women are supposed to be this way, and her daughter does everything. Both of her children really are going against the grain and kind of going up against what should be a more, in this time frame, what a woman should be. A woman should be more, what's the word I'm looking for? She should be more, humble's not the word. I can't find the word I'm trying to look for, but should be more prim and proper and have good morals and values. That's kind of what, because in Alice's mind, like, Polly doing what she does makes Polly dead to them. But it also it's like, right, it's almost an indictment. Because she does this, it doesn't matter how much of a good person she is. It's more of an indictment of like, oh, you doing this thing is a representation of who you are. It's just kind of making it seem like, oh, because you're a burlesque dancer, it makes you a terrible person. When in actuality, it doesn't, what you do shouldn't be an indictment on who you are as a person type of situation, especially in that capacity of what her career is. But getting back to the point I was also making is, obviously, like, from my recollection, Polly and Betty always had a pretty good relationship up until the farm situation in season 4. Polly got swept up in that. Betty had a lot of animosity towards her, and it wasn't until like they tried bridging that gap and connecting again post like the time skip in season 5. But obviously, sadly, Polly ended up getting murdered, and that put a strain on the relationship. She did come back in season 6, so they did have a chance to kind of repair things in that regard. So it's kind of nice to have the relationship being like good again, like, kind of where it left off before season 7 was in a good place. So it's kind of nice to see it still in a good place. And for her to tell her sister, like, right, for one, I'm getting married, and not only would I want you to come to my wedding, I hope that you can be my maid of honor, which I thought was so beautiful. But also she was like, yo, whatever you want to do, don't let mom or anyone else stop you from doing and pursuing whatever it is that you want. You deserve to do what you want to and have someone And that's even something that Betty was saying, like she would want to do whatever she wants to be free, to have control of her own life and decide for herself what she wants to do, and to have someone who is so in love with her, so dedicated to her. And she confronts her mom at the end because her mom didn't show up at the show. It's like, right, this could have been an opportunity to bridge the gap. Like, you are the main reason why we haven't been a family. All three of us, mother and daughters, could have been together in this moment, but you chose not to. You chose not to be there to support Polly. And Polly's like, yeah, it's fine. I already knew mom wasn't going to show up, but I'm not going to let that control the rest of my life. I love my life. I love what I do. I love that, I'm married to a stockbroker. I'm having a beautiful and amazing life, and I'm going to get married, and I'm going to be happy, and I'm not going to let my mom's issues with that. Like, I'm not going to let her, she's out of my life. If she wants to consider me dead, then so be it. I'm not going to bend over backwards just to please her. And Betty's been feeling that more and more. And that's the sad thing of, like, and I've talked about this time and time again over this season of how Betty's always had this very tumultuous relationship with Alice, that it's like, right, they always take one step forward and two steps back, especially this season, especially after the last episode with Miss Teen Riverdale. It felt like, okay, we're taking steps in the right direction. I'm like, yeah, there's a good person there, but it's overshadowed by all of Alice's judgment and BS. Because I think, like, right, she's got to be overcompensating for so much. And just Betty told her what was what. Like, the moment I'm old enough, I'm leaving this town and never coming back. Like, I'm not going to let you drag me down, because Polly is living her best life, and that's what I'm going to do. Because I know if I stay here, you're going to ruin my life, and I'm not going to let you do that. Because you're sad and lonely. And her mom slapped her, and Betty was just like, wow, I'm actually surprised it took you this long to do it. It's like, you've been wanting to do it for a while, and that's the final straw. It's like, you put your hands on me. Because I'm trying to think, like, do correct me in the comments down below. It's like, has Alice ever put her hands on Betty in that way before? I feel like maybe she has. I mean, especially the way, like, she's been, like, very, like, not only have you now physically abusive, you've been very, like, mentally and emotionally abusive to your own daughter, too, because she won't conform to what you want her to be. So, and the sad thing is, Alice is driving away both of her daughters. This is going, and it's, I think I keep making this reference of, it's very moral oral-ish, that it's like, she's going to sadly not have anyone, because if I remember correctly how moral oral ends, it's kind of like, Moro goes off and has a good family of his own based on the ending. It's been many, many years, so I don't remember. But it's like, yeah, his mom and dad were unhappy. And, it feels like Alice is going to be in that same boat if she doesn't change things now. That her and Hal are going to be stuck together, and she's going to have so many regrets and animosity, and that, her and Hal kind of have their issues already. I'm sure that's only going to grow more if things continue to rot between her and Betty. If she doesn't make a change to try and reach out to Betty, to try and reach out to Polly, and maybe that's something we can see by the end of the season, that maybe she'll show up at the wedding, and that, or maybe she will, before the wedding comes around, she's able to kind of like change, and all of her family, the entire family, can be together, Hal included. We'll see. Not much time left to kind of get to that, but that has to be one of the final episodes, because after this, it's like, what? 4 episodes left this show, so it has to be a situation of, like, that has to be in one of those final 4 episodes. I don't know if it'll be like the final episode, or the series finale or not, or maybe even the penultimate episode. We'll see how things kind of play out. So yeah, we have all of that. Another plot that we have is kind of staying in that, like, figuring things out situation is Archie and Reggie get a video from Julian. I thought that when they find out, like, it's a wrestling video, I was like, I thought maybe Kevin and Clay left their video in there. It was like, no, Julian did it on purpose to mess with them. And then got a new one. But I love that, like, they were like, maybe we should watch. Yeah, just in case some girls show up. And it got them thinking, because Archie was reading this, because of what Archie heard in the writing class about, like, some powerful, like, thinkers kind of going against the grain, kind of like being very punk about going up against what will be kind of like the hetero norms and stuff. And, because even Archie's kind of like, like, these are very prolific people who've lived lives, and what could I really write about? I'll never be a great writer, because, like, I'm pretty vanilla and square. And Clay was like, yeah, maybe you kind of should be more open up opening up your mind. So I was like, is something really going to happen between Reggie and Archie? I was like, it's kind of a brother thing, kind of a best friend thing going on here. I was like, is that what once again, this show is going places I would have never expected with this final season. Like, once again, Archie and Reggie just being like besties is already wild, almost like brothers. But now you kind of get in that weird spot where it's like, okay, there's something going on there. There's the Veronica and Betty thing, which had never really been a thing at all. Being a thing now is kind of wild. So, but yeah, Archie and, because the video, it was going to be kind of like a threesome thing between a guy and two women, but the thing messed up. It's like, oh my God, I'm so horny. Like, what are we going to do? So they go and see Twyla, and, both of them, things happen. I was like, yo! And because they took Miss Grundy's advice about like, oh yeah, watching a sunset with someone drinking coffee. And it's like, oh wow, it was such a mind-shattering experience. And both of them just being like, whoa, this is so beautiful. I never saw a sunrise so beautiful. It's like, yeah. And I love Archie to me like, I love you, man. I love you, Reggie. And he's like, I love you too, bud. I was like, yeah. It's actually sweet because it's like, yeah, it actually brought them together. Like, whether or not anything will ever happen in the future, which immediately my brain's like, wait, so we're going back to this large conversation I've had previous. Like, I don't know what the hell the couplings at the end of this is going to look like. Because it's like, well, there's no Tabitha and Jughead, it seems like. Because, well, we know Ethel likes Jughead. She's always liked Jughead. But that kind of got a little murky this episode. What I was also thinking was, like, we're not going to get a situation where it's kind of like maybe Reggie and Veronica get together and so does Archie and Betty. But they kind of switch off like, oh, a Betty and Veronica and a Reggie and Archie, or like a Veronica and Archie and a Betty and Reggie, considering like they also like each other. You know, like Archie likes Veronica and Betty, Reggie likes Veronica and Betty, but also Betty and Veronica like both of them and like each other. So it's like, I was like, is that going to be their thing of like, oh, we're going to be kind of like, which would be interesting considering like the complicated nature those two separate couples had, because Veronica was always still in love with Archie even when she was with Reggie, and Reggie had issues with that. So I don't know. It'd be interesting if that, I don't know if that's the route they're going to go with that. Like I said, the waters got muddied even more because staying with kind of like the Veronica of it all, she's helping Jughead, and was it Fieldstone is the guy who runs Pep Comics, because they're being censored by Werther's, and others are trying to like confine like what they are able to put on the comics and what they're able to publish and stuff, and they're trying to fight back against this censorship, because it's not just Werther's and the principal, it's not just Werther's and Featherstone, it's also like the head of the Sisters of Quiet Mercy, she's there. Then there's also Clifford, he's a part of all of this, and Jughead and Fieldstone are trying to do everything they can to push back against it, but they're kind of backed into a corner because literally it's like, no, there's no changing this. It's about like they're demonizing comics, even though it's like, right, all of this falls under free speech. And it's like, right, it's like, because even Jughead's like, why do you have such an issue? It's like, right, because the stuff you writing could warp the mind of these young people to do these terrible things. It's the same, like, it's an older argument, but it's the same argument of, oh, violent video games lead to people doing stuff. Like, it's a avenue that maybe someone who already has some mental issues might latch on to something, but that could be, it doesn't just have to be video games. They could latch on to literally anything. Just video games always end up being the scapegoat for very horrible, horrendous things happening in the world. Like video games in particular have always kind of suffered that brunt of like, oh, I mean, once again, you take something like Dungeons and Dragons, something innocent as that was considered satanic at one point in time. So it's in that same vein. Even though it is supposed to just be about expression. But even Jughead's like, okay, so you're saying all that. Okay, so are you going to demonize the Bible with all the murder and blood and death and stuff like that goes on? And then it's like, oh, but it's, is that hypocrisy of like, well, because of the values that you're supposed to learn from the good moral values you're supposed to learn from the Bible versus like, oh, you can't learn anything from this smut, which is complete horseshit because stories like that have their own messages and their own like moral lessons you can learn from those stories. Cause they're like, none of our stories like paint any of these like bad guys or anything we're writing, like none of it gets painted in a good light of like, oh, this is a great thing. It's like, no, it's storytelling. It's meant to scare you. It's meant to invoke a certain feeling from you. But regardless of it all, Jughead and Phil Stone, like, I have no choice. They have to adhere to this or they won't be able to publish their comics. Every other comic publisher has bit to this will of like, yeah, these stipulations, they've all agreed to it. So if you don't, no comic stand is going to publish your stuff, even like your, what was it, Super Duck or whatever like book they tried, like the more kid friendly, because Jughead tried to suggest like, hey, why don't we put a rating system on it? But it's like, oh, that's just going to make kids want them more. It's like, it's meant to be a situation of kind of like how video games are. Like, if you aren't 17 trying to get them, I mean, depends on the person, but I remember being in high school and before I turned 17 trying to buy an M-rated game and people being like, yeah, we're going to need to see some ID. Like, obviously I don't have to worry about that anymore, but yeah, you get the, you know, so it's kind of that same thing of like, right, like a movie being rated, you know, it's like, right, here's some stuff that kids should get, teenagers should get, this is something that should be only adult rated. You know, video games had those ESRB ratings, so it's supposed to be kind of like something Jughead was kind of suggesting, but it's like, no, that's not enough. It's like, it's just going to make kids want it more. It's like, yeah, but I mean, kids want something bad enough. I see the argument of they'll find a way to get it, but at least you put this buffer zone in a way. But then there's also going to be people like, yo, you want this kid? Go ahead and pass it to him either way. So I get the point, but at least Jughead was trying to make solutions, but they weren't trying to hear it. So Jughead doesn't know what he's going to do about all of this, but Veronica's like, we'll figure out a way. He's like, she's like, yeah, because regardless of it all, Jughead, you're on the right side of history. And it's like, you're on the right side of this fight. And it's like, right, didn't we try this before and we kind of screwed up? She's like, yeah, but we're here right now. And they start making out. I'm like, what is that going to turn into? Because it's like, right, Ethel likes you. And does that mean there's nothing going to happen between you and Ethel? It's like, because Tabitha's only been in the show for like, what, 3? No, not even 3. Only 2 episodes, I think. No, I think she's been in 3 episodes of this season. So, once again, I don't know if that's like just a show thing or maybe the actress is like busy and other stuff, so they kind of had to write her out of this season. Once again, I don't know how that's going to wrap up with the ending of what the other Tabitha was doing, the Guardian of Riverdale. Like, I don't know if like that's got to circle back like at the very end. Once again, there's just so much we don't know. Because I was not expecting this storyline just to be what it is. I'm perfectly fine with it being what it has turned into, but I was so certain of like, okay, this is all going to bleed over into the main overarching. It's like, no, that main overarching storyline was introduced in the first episode and it's been gone ever since. Even the Milkman thing, I was like, oh, does that tie in? Nope, it's just he was a 1950s sociopath. So either way, it's just like, I feel bad because like, my point is like Ethel likes Jughead. She always did. So I kind of would want them to get together. Maybe this is just kind of a fleeting thing between Jughead and Veronica. Maybe it's going to be a little bit more. Like, yo, love is like not just confined to just one thing. Like I said, these couplings are wild because like some stuff is like solidified. Fang and Mitch solidified. Clay and Kevin solidified. Tony and Cheryl solidified. Then you get into the territory of like the Jughead, Veronica, Reggie, Betty, and Archie situation. Betty is flowing more the Veronica and Archie side of things, and Veronica's floating the Archie, Reggie, and Veronica and Betty side of things. So it's like, I don't know. Like I said, that's so interesting. I mean, the couplings are there if they like go down that route. Like it could just be like an Ethel and Jughead do end up together because they are such good friends. So I don't know. So anyway, getting back to it though, what Veronica and Jughead's fight looks like going forward with this whole comic situation is going to be interesting. Other than that, we also have Cheryl and Tony wanting to take some risque photos of their own, and it's like, yeah, once again, it's like this is a horny season. It's like it's very beautiful, but it's also like, hot and steamy. And then, obviously Penelope finds the photos, destroys them, even the oil painting that Cheryl was doing of them. Like, she took one of their photos and she drew an oil painting of it, destroyed it, and now it's like, okay, so my mom's going to use that against me. Once again, I'm surprised she wasn't already shipped off to the Sisters of Quiet Mercy. I guess, like, they're not doing that yet because it's like, well, she already was in the original, like, back in, wasn't it season 2 of the show? Season 2-ish, she was sent off, so maybe they're not quite ready to do that yet, because also it draws unwanted attention to the Blossom family. But Cheryl is tired of the BS. It's like, all right, they want to play these games. My mom want to put me in this situation, just like, Betty's rebelling against her mom. Cheryl's rebelling against her family, and I guess it's like she's going to take one of those photos of her and the negatives of her and Tony, and she's going to put it and submit it to one of the magazines. Because Tony suggested, but it's like, oh, we'll wait till. But Cheryl's like, at least let's wait until we're graduated. That way we don't have to worry about any consequences for her and her family. But not Cheryl's like, nah, screw that. They want the smoke, I'm going to bring the heat. And they're, so she's going to shut her family down once and for all. So what that means in a grand scheme of things, I have no idea. I'm curious how Julian's going to react. I'm sure, I know Penelope and Clifford aren't going to be happy, but what the aftermath that would be like, we'll ultimately have to wait to see. It's going to be so interesting to see where all this takes us. Like I said, we are down to the wire. Only 4 episodes left. I had to count it again. So it's going to be interesting to see where the next episode ends up taking us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.